Thank you for joining Black Superwoman Chronicles for our newest series, Young Creatives Corner, or YCC. YCC is a series of interviews that was created out of necessity as a place for young Black female artists to have a place to showcase their work while networking with other artists around the country. What do you think is kind of the difference between appropriation and celebration of Black culture?
Right. Well, a primary example that I think of, especially with clothing, artists that are designing their own lines, is larger corporations, larger brands stealing their designs and just posting them as their own. So that's what I primarily think of in that sense. Primary example, a Pretty Little Thing, like stealing from Black designers and like other larger brands from them. So the main difference is just corporations like taking Black art and just projecting it as their own and not attributing it to the artist from which it originated from.
So, hi, Len0rart. Thank you so much for joining us for Young Creatives Corner. I wanted to first start by asking you about your experience as an artist. How did you get started, and what has your journey been like to get to this point?
Right. Well, I started painting, I believe, in 7th grade, and I was a part of my program at my school. Everyone had to do some kind of art, so I chose to do visual arts. So I really stuck with that after finding out that I had a talent for it and something I was very passionate about. And what has my journey been like? It's been definitely a very long one, and especially I feel like it changed when I started oil painting, because in school I only had access to acrylic, which acrylic is great, but it just kind of dries really quickly. And I felt like I was able to create more depth in my painting with oil. And it also sparked my ideas seeing like other artists who primarily worked with oil and like their pieces.
Right. Yeah, and I wanted to ask about your paintings. So they're like more realistic. So have you always been into that, or is that something new?
Yeah, I pretty much have. And even in my classes, I would like doodle on the side. I would do like eyes and like nose and lips. So I've pretty much been into painting people or drawing people for a lot of my time in art. I was never good at drawing objects, so I kind of just like strayed away from that. So definitely in my painting process, like I spent a lot of time like on the person that I'm doing, but with the background and other objects, I kind of lack a little bit in that aspect, or slack a little bit. But yeah, so definitely I like doing realism with people specifically.
Yeah, totally understand. And just out of curiosity, like how long does it usually take for you to finish a painting?
That's a really great question. It really just depends on the piece, whether it's a size or if it's for someone, if it's a commission, then I spend a lot of time on the face to make sure that it looks like the person that they're giving it to. So it could take anywhere from a week just for drying times to my longest painting took a couple of months, but that's because the size of it is really, really big. But yeah, so it just varies.
So I really love looking through your pieces, and I noticed that a lot of them kind of blackified well-known brands like Nike, Supreme, and Dior. So can you talk a little bit about those pieces and the inspiration behind that work?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm actually blanking on the artist's name, but I originally discovered this one artist, and she did a painting that was kind of similar to my Hermes painting. That was the first painting I did in that type of series, where taking designers and kind of just tweaking it a little bit and like making it my own flair. And since I had such success with that piece, then I started incorporating that with some of my other pieces that incorporated Black people. So that's where I started like experimenting. And I specialize in doing Black women, but I did want to include Black men in my art. So I was trying to think of different avenues that would be, I guess, like quote unquote, like interesting to them. So I guess surrounding the hype around designer brands, I decided to include some of those brands with some of the pieces that I did with Black men.
Yeah. I think it really works in your paintings, and I really love that whole collection.
Thank you.
So there was also a quote on your website that I really liked. You talked about how your pieces highlight Black people and their beautiful features, and which are often appropriated in mainstream beauty culture. This page is a working reminder that society needs to associate our signature hips, lips, and protective styles with the Blackness from which they originate. So first of all, so well spoken, so prolific. What inspired you to kind of take up this charge in your artwork?
Well, a very important thing to me is representation, and in all aspects. But given that I'm a visual artist, I knew that like with my role with art that I could incorporate that representation. So that's been something that I've tried to do throughout my entire journey, even in some of the pieces that like I haven't posted that are from high school, from my earlier days. So that's just like a mission that's kind of resonated with me throughout my journey, and especially being a Black woman, I would like to see like my features also featured within my art as well.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think is kind of the difference between appropriation and celebration of Black culture?
Right. Well, a primary example that I think of, especially with clothing artists that are designing their like own like lines, is larger corporations, larger brands stealing their designs and just posting them as their own. So that's what I primarily think of in that sense. Primary example, a Pretty Little Thing, like stealing from Black designers and like other larger brands from them. So the main difference is just corporations like taking Black art and just projecting it as their own and not attributing it to the artist from which it originated from.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And we can kind of see that in like all forms of culture, like especially hair. When I think that one brand that used Bantu knots and called it space buns. So just kind of like renaming things and like attributing them like wrongly, I think is really damaging. And yeah, you bring up some great points about appropriation. So I think my last question in general, so what has been your favorite piece to create so far and why?
Definitely my Hermes piece has been my favorite. And with that one, I usually take inspiration photos from the internet and kind of tweak it, because the way that I work, I need to see something to then paint off of it to mimic it. But with this piece, like I created my own collage on Photoshop. So this was my first piece where I kind of created my own inspiration for it rather than just searching on the internet for Black people where I could mimic like facial features and whatnot. But also the amount of time that I put into that painting, that was definitely on the longer end of it. It took a couple of months, honestly, just for the number of layers that are in that painting. Also, it was probably my most tedious painting. For the logo, I had to actually like flip the image of the Hermes logo, and then I kind of like imprinted it on the painting itself. But by doing that, like I had to make sure it was perfect because I had already had like a bunch of layers of paint. So I took parchment paper and like I put it into like the paper slot. So that like always messes up my printer. So it was just like kind of a more tedious process, but like I'm really pleased with the way that it came out. And definitely like pushed myself out of my comfort zone in that sense. So definitely like kind of changed the trajectory for the rest of my pieces, I would say.
Yeah, and I can definitely see like all the hard work you put into it, because it's really a great piece. And I think hearing you talk about it, I think it makes people realize that the finished product is all you see, but you really don't see all that process and all that work that goes into it.
Right.
So, yeah. So that's a fantastic piece, and I can see why it would be one of your favorites. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And now it's time for Hot Topics. Okay, Len0rart, thank you so much for talking about your art so far. And we're going to transition into like some of the weightier topics that have been really resonating with our audience so far. So a lot of people have been thinking about police brutality lately, especially with everything that's been going on, especially as it relates to the excessive and deadly force used against Black people. So, how are you managing in these times, and what support do you think that Black women or Black artists need during this time?
Right. So, definitely for me personally, I found that I've needed breaks from social media, especially I would say like in the summer when the peak of COVID hit as well. And I just remember being on Twitter was just really difficult during that time. And it was just a constant reminder and just so frustrating that you kind of felt like very helpless in those moments. And I found that also it was a lot of videos of Black people getting killed. And personally, like, it was really hard for me to look at that. Although it is important to spread awareness, it just was really hard for me to look at specifically those videos. So I felt like I had to take a break from like social media as a whole. And speaking towards what people can do to support Black artists during this time, often we're expected to keep producing content like a machine, especially with social media. That's your primary outlet of spreading awareness of your art. But at least personally, as an artist, I had to take a step back from my art account. And I feel so that people's audiences should be accepting that sometimes they have to take breaks as well. And it may look like you're not as active on your account, you're not as passionate, but it's not a reflection if you just need to take a break for personal reasons.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I would just want to like validate what you said about like taking breaks. I think people have really become like insensitive towards Black death and Black harm. The way that these videos of people actually being killed on camera are like circulated is dehumanizing, it's insensitive. And yeah, so I think if anybody is listening and feels like as a Black artist that they need to contribute to the conversation, it's okay to like take a break. It is okay to like prioritize your own mental health in these times. So my second question for you would be, would you consider art as activism? And in what ways do you think art can take a more active role in uplifting Black women, especially?
Right. I mean, I definitely would consider art activism based on the messages behind art are very important. And it's definitely a great outlet to spread awareness about issues. And let's see, what ways do I think art can take a role? Definitely what I was speaking towards before, representation. We don't see a lot of representation of diverse Black people in particular, and a lot of media. And particularly with art, I feel like it's a really great avenue to explore with different types of Black people that you're not normally seeing in mainstream social media. And yeah, I guess speaking back towards cultural appropriation and just showing audiences where Blackness comes from, where it originates from.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that is so powerful because I think mainstream media, it kind of like perpetuates this one view of a Black woman, especially. And usually that Black woman isn't always like fully Black, like she's mixed with something, has the long hair, the light skin. So it can be really damaging not to see that type of representation of how diverse the Black community is. So thank you so much for your art and like what it does to uplift Black women.
Yeah, of course.
So that concludes Hot Topics. Len0rart, do you have any encouragement to give to other young Black artists who might be trying to pursue art and make like a living out of it, or just trying to do it creatively on the side?
Right. That's funny because I feel like I'm still in that process of figuring that out as well. Definitely, I would want other artists to know that if you're feeling burnout, it's perfectly fine. Like, I can personally speak, like, sometimes you just have to take a break from commissions, especially when you're pumping them out like a machine. Like, it's hard, and it's a lot of time and money spent into those pieces as well. So it's definitely okay to take a break from painting as well. Doesn't mean that you're not passionate about it anymore. You just need to recharge. And also to explore different avenues. Myself personally, I found that when I've experienced burnout with painting, I've tried to look for other artistic avenues such as like graphic design, or I started making hoodies. And that was another way to create an income for, I guess, less effort in production. rather than with painting. I found like I was spending hours and months, weeks on painting. So just exploring different avenues to get your ideas out there, and you might find something that you like until you go back to your original medium, or just experiment with things.
Yeah, that is some great advice. And I hope that anybody listening can really take some encouragement from that and be able to like expand your art form. You can, if one thing isn't really working for you, just try something new. Experimentation is a part of the art process.
Right.
So thank you so much, Len0rart, for joining us for Young Creatives Corner. It's been a pleasure. And your social media and your website will be linked in the description box so that people can find you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
If you'd like to learn more about Black Superwoman Chronicles, check us out on our website or follow us on our social media at BSW Chronicles.